Good evening to all of you. I'm Andrea Bayer, the Deputy Director for Collections and Administration, and it is my true honor tonight to introduce Dr. Carmen Bambach, the Marica C. and Jan T. Vilcek Curator in the Department of Drawings and Prints. Carmen will be speaking about her exhibition, Raphael, Sublime Poetry. Looking around this packed auditorium, I sense that most of you have already experienced the exhibition, although probably you're ready to acknowledge that you have not yet completed your exploration of it. And you will agree with me that it is one of the great museum experiences of the past decades. With over 170 works by the artist, it makes the case that Raphael, whose life was so tragically cut short in 1520 at the age of 37, was unsurpassed for his searching visual mind, the brilliance of his technique in all the media he undertook, his understanding of both the classical world and contemporary artistic practice, and for his role as the consummate organizer of a studio that created large-scale, elaborate, important frescoes and other ensembles of complex imagery. For reasons that Carmen has discussed that have to do with changes in taste and artistic approaches, we may feel today that it is instinctively easier for us to love and admire Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo, whose lives, of course, overlapped with Raphael's. But no visitor could move through the rooms of the exhibition uninspired as we witness the evolution of an artist of extreme emotional profundity and sensitivity to beauty. Dr. Bambach's work grew out of a deep interest in Renaissance drawing and its role in the artist's workshop, culminating in a dissertation for Yale University and then a book outlining this role, both in theory and in practice. Since joining the Met some 25 years ago, she has worked on a number of important exhibitions on artists ranging from Filippino Lippi to Bronzino. But to many of you, she will be best known as the creator of a trilogy of exhibitions that have been groundbreaking explorations of these three greatest Renaissance artists: Leonardo da Vinci, Master Draftsman, 2003, Michelangelo, Divine Draftsman and Designer, 2017, and now Raphael, Sublime Poetry. Her work on the Leonardo exhibition was followed by 4 magisterial volumes published by Yale University Press in 2019, Leonardo da Vinci Rediscovered, that will remain the basis of all further investigation of that great artist's work. Carmen has received many honors and fellowships that acknowledge her major contribution to the understanding of Italian art, including from Harvard University's Villa E. Tatti Center for Renaissance Studies, the Vilcek Foundation's Prize for Excellence, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and the National Gallery of Art's Center for the Advanced Study of the Visual Arts. Now, as I have observed it, Carmen's work has always stressed certain key approaches: close attention and analysis of individual objects, which is critical to her mind for the understanding of drawings; a belief that artistic biography can lead us into a deeper understanding of these objects; and, in a different category altogether, a delight in working within an international community of scholars, curators, and collectors. This last helps explain why the Raphael exhibition can boast of some 62 lenders and why the many Italian directors, curators, and conservators who came to the opening or have subsequently visited the exhibition have reported that they are deeply happy to be a part of this monumental undertaking. We could not have done the show without our own supporters closer to home. I want to acknowledge the presenting sponsor of Raphael, Morgan Stanley, for their support, as well as Kenneth C. Griffin and Griffin Catalyst, and Jesse and Charles Price, who provided major funding towards this exhibition. I share my thanks as well to the many other individual and institutional donors who made the exhibition possible. So, altogether, as viewers passionate about Raphael's art, we are the principal beneficiaries of all that I have been describing: the research, the diplomacy, the support. And tonight, we will have the added pleasure of learning more about the exhibition from its curator. Please join me in welcoming Carmen Bambach.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming. Welcome to this lecture, which accompanies the Met's exhibition. I'm delighted to see so many of you who are so supportive, friends, colleagues. It's a joy to see an audience that is so supportive. Thank you. So Raphael is a towering figure in the history of Western art. The Met's exhibition, Raphael Sublime Poetry, is the first comprehensive exhibition on this great artist in the United States and is on view until June 28th. So hurry, it's 3 weeks from now before it ends. The Met is the only venue of the show because the drawings, paintings, prints, and tapestries on display are so rare and so extremely fragile that they cannot travel to another venue. The exhibition has a total of 237 works, and of these, 175 works are by Raphael, 142 drawings by him, and 33 paintings, selected from museums, public institutions, and private collections from around the world. We are so profoundly grateful to the 62 museums, institutions, and collectors who have generously lent their precious works to the Met's exhibition. I felt that Met's exhibition deserved the title Raphael Sublime Poetry because this is the story of an artist who was the son of a prolific poet and painter. Raphael was also an intimate friend and portrait painter of many poets and literary figures, such as Baldassare Castiglione, the author of the famous Book of the Courtier. The exhibition includes Raphael's magnificent portrait of Baldassare Castiglione from the Louvre. Raphael attempted to compose sonnets himself around 1511 and 1512, and you see that one example here on the right. Okay, so his talent was painting and drawing, and perhaps a little less poetry. The elegiac beauty and dramatic force of Raphael's imagery often reminded educated Renaissance viewers of the ancient dictum, much invoked in the Renaissance, and I quote, that painting is a mute poetry and poetry is a blind painting, end of quote. Within the elevated intellectual circles in which Raphael had created his art, painting and poetry were often seamlessly intertwined. And no less often, in the competitive spirit of the Renaissance, painting and poetry were seen as rival arts. Raffaello di Giovanni Santi, or simply Raphael, was born in 1483 in Urbino, in the eastern part of central Italy. Until his death in 1520, Raphael was known after his birthplace of Urbino, and he himself continuously signed his paintings Raphael of Urbino until his death. This drawing is a presumed self-portrait of Raphael at the age of 17 or so, revealing that he was a child prodigy as a draftsman. His enormous creative facility, together with the brevity of his life, has led some people to call Raphael the Mozart of Western art. Raphael worked in the regions of the Marche, Umbria, and Tuscany, with notable private patrons in Florence. Arriving in Rome in 1508, he rose quickly to the highest echelons of society at the courts of Popes Julius II and Leo X. Raphael spent the last 12 years of his life in Rome, celebrated as the Prince of Painters. He died at the age of 37. In his prolific but short career, Raphael excelled as a draftsman and painter, and later also excelled as an architect, as a designer of tapestries and theatrical sets. He was a major architectural theorist and a scholar of ancient Rome and its monuments. I'm especially interested in the biography of artists and believe that we can recover a sense of Raphael's artistic personality as we dive into his creative mind. Therefore, I've structured the Met's exhibition as a journey through Raphael's life and career, arranged in roughly chronological order from his artistic beginnings in the late 1490s to his death in 1520. Seeing his works according to a chronology allows us to understand Raphael's phenomenal growth as an artist. Sections of the show also concentrate on key themes, which in my view get to the heart of Raphael's artistic production. For example, it seemed important to emphasize Raphael's roots in the town of Urbino, where he was born. The Met's exhibition includes works by Raphael's father, Giovanni Santi, who was a painter and poet. Although Giovanni Santi died when Raphael was only 11, he was more influential in his son's upbringing than is usually thought. He provided the young Raphael with the beginnings of an intellectual and artistic education. However, Raphael's major teacher was Pietro Perugino, from whom the young boy learned the craft of painting and drawing and very particular design practices. From the mid-1490s to around 1500, Perugino also offered Raphael the role model for an artist who was a very successful businessman. The regions of the Marche and Umbria in central Italy, where Raphael first operated, had distinctive patterns of patronage. I have highlighted here especially the role of confraternities, which were secular religious institutions of charity. This alcove in the show unites paintings for confraternities done by the young Raphael, Pinturicchio, and Perugino. Among Raphael's early works, the Met's exhibition focuses attention on his monumental ensemble, now known as the Colonna altarpiece. As you see here, the Met owns the main parts of the altarpiece, the main panel with the Madonna and Child and saints, and the lunette with God the Father and two angels. But the Colonna altarpiece originally consisted of multiple parts and included a base or predella, which contained 5 small painted panels. The individual paintings from the altarpiece were dismantled and sold off in the 1660s and 1670s and are now dispersed in different museums. So for the first time since the 1660s, all the component paintings of the Colonna altarpiece are presented in the exhibition as a reunited structure, as you see in this slide. The long central panel of the predella of the Colonna altarpiece is a painting of the procession to Calvary from London's National Gallery. In case you overlook it, this detail of the London painting reveals a young Raphael's already extraordinary skill as a landscape painter. The procession to Calvary is set in a landscape with the sky seen in dimming sunlight. In the background, tiny buildings and towns appear in the bluish haze of the distant landscape, and in the middle ground at right, some castellated buildings rise amidst green hills, valleys, and a body of water. Another part of the predella of the Colonna altarpiece is a painting coming from Boston's Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Raphael first designed another monumental painting, the Baronci altarpiece, in 1500-1501, which he painted in collaboration with Evangelista da Pian di Meleto, as the extant contract for the commission states. Raphael drew the composition of this large altarpiece on the sheet, and here you see front and back of this very rare sheet from Lille, the Palais des Beaux-Arts. In these drawings, Raphael relied on deftly constructed geometry to create symmetry and visual harmony in the large figural composition. The Baronci altarpiece, however, was destroyed in an earthquake, and only 3 fragments survive, and at left you see a reconstruction of this altarpiece. For the Metz exhibition, I chose the exquisite and best preserved of the 3 painted fragments of the Baronci altarpiece, the head of an angel from Brescia, which to my eye is the only fragment painted entirely by Raphael's hand. The young Raphael's drawings and paintings are of virtuosic technical execution. It seems clear that his brilliant drawings became his calling card during his early years as an artist, and so illustrated at left is a probable demonstration drawing by Raphael done to cultivate a patron. The exhibition is conceived as a glimpse over the artist's shoulder so as to understand the intimacy of Raphael's creative process. Done when Raphael was 20 or so, this drawing for the foreshortened head of the Apostle James reveals a dazzling command of anatomical perspective. In 1504, the 21-year-old Raphael went to study in Florence to learn from the great artists, especially Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. A room in the exhibition celebrates Raphael's experience of the great Florentine artists. From Leonardo, Raphael learned analytical techniques of design, as you see from Leonardo's sheet, with a study of human proportion and with the awesome sketches in red chalk for the Battle of Anghiari. Called Il bozzare pronto, Leonardo's manner of sketching quickly with great energy and spontaneity on paper was revolutionary in his time. The Metz exhibition illustrates this with another superb sheet of quick sketches by Leonardo, in which different ideas explore the same theme of the Virgin adoring the Christ child. The experience of Leonardo's brainstorm sketches completely transformed the young Raphael's design process. Raphael learned to let go of the impulse to finish drawings with many details and instead let his imagination run loose on the paper. Here, he tested several different ideas for a Madonna and Child on the same sheet of paper. It was all about letting the creative juices flow. Here is another sheet with brainstorm sketches by Raphael in his new improvisational style. And here he mainly focused on the poses of the child. Raphael's rare full-scale design or cartoon for a painting of Saint Catherine is a breathtaking loan to the exhibition from the Musée du Louvre in Paris. This monumental drawing has an enormous expressive power and sculptural presence, partly indebted to his experience of Michelangelo's art. By 1507, Raphael's drawing style was forceful and gestural, less concerned with the surface of refined finish. Raphael's cartoon of Saint Catherine at left also reveals his attentive study of Leonardo's figural vocabulary, the contrapposto or counterpoint pose of the figure, with the head and the body elegantly turning in opposite directions, was explored by Leonardo in his famous destroyed painting of Leda and the Swan. And at right is a painted copy after Leonardo's lost Leda and the Swan. The Met's exhibition presents a copy after Michelangelo's destroyed Battle of Cascina cartoon, which young artists, including Raphael, studied with great attention for the masterful command of male anatomy and complex foreshortened poses. At right, Raphael's analytical study of the straining musculature of three male nudes is in his new Florentine style, and was intended for the mourners in the Baglione Entombment of Christ. We may compare Raphael's powerful drawing at right to a detail from the copy after Michelangelo's lost Battle of Cascina cartoon, seen at left. I've collaborated with the Met's brilliant exhibition designer Dan Kershaw to create a clear visual plotline for the show with vistas and the architectural celebration of special themes of interest, such as Raphael's imagery of the Madonna and Child and his magnificent portraits. In the displays of Raphael's imagery of the Madonna and Child, I have presented his paintings and drawings not only in their artistic context, but I have also noted the religious significance and deeper meaning of this imagery as we consider the shockingly high mortality of young women of childbearing age and the high mortality of children. Therefore, in an alcove in the exhibition, you will see Verrocchio and Ferrucci's magnificent marble relief portraying the death of Francesca Pitti Tornabuoni in childbirth in 1477. Here is a detail of the right side of the marble relief. Having given birth, Francesca Pitti Tornabuoni is dead and is held up while mourning women around her express different stages of grief. A nursemaid holds a baby at lower right, and it is a dead baby boy. We know a great deal about the tragic death of this young woman in 1477. Giovanni Tornabuoni, the young woman's husband, wrote a letter explaining to his nephew, the famous Lorenzo de Medici the Magnificent, that his wife, Francesca, had died in childbirth the day before, after suffering 22 hours of labor. And Giovanni Tornabuoni also noted that the child was taken from her womb by cesarean section, and that it was a baby boy who was dead. In this detail of the left side of the marble relief, we see an elderly woman presenting the dead baby to Giovanni Tornabuoni, who is surrounded by members of his family and friends. So Giovanni Tornabuoni said that his grief was double, having lost his wife and also his firstborn son, which was very important in noble families in Florence. In the Met's exhibition, you will also see a vitrine which displays 2 volumes. Inside this vitrine, at right, is the account book containing the funeral and burial expenses for Raphael's mother, Magia Charla, who died in 1491 of childbirth complications when Raphael was 8 years old. This account book also records the expenses for Raphael's baby sister, who died days after Raphael's mother. Displayed inside the vitrine at left is a large and very rare anatomical treatise attributed to Johannes de Quetam, which was printed in Venice in 1491. The hand-colored woodcut on the left illustrates the state of knowledge of a woman's reproductive organs the same year of the death of Raphael's mother in 1491. I'm sure it's hard to recognize any of the organs inside the belly and torso of the woman. The awareness of the astronomically high mortality rates of young women and children in early modern times can help us experience Raphael's imagery in a more profoundly emotive context. This awareness can also help us better understand the spiritual significance of hope for a society that was accustomed to premature death, as we contemplate the ideal beauty and affecting humanity of Raphael's Virgin and Child. An example is the Nicolini Cooper Madonna from the National Gallery of Art in Washington, in which Raphael rendered exquisite effects of color and light. The affecting humanity is palpable in the playfulness and innocence of the child. Here are details of this extraordinary painting from Washington. The blonde Madonna embodies the ideals of beauty in Petrarch's poetry and looks more somberly with knowledge of what is to befall her son when he grows up. The thematic section on Raphael's Madonnas includes another painting from the National Gallery of Art in Washington that was intended for the court of the Dukes of Urbino. This detail of the small Cooper Madonna includes the church of San Bernardino at Rite, which was a mausoleum church for the Dukes of Montefeltro and della Rovere. The church is located outside the city walls of Urbino. So here I would like to talk a little bit about a very important aspect of our research. Scientific imaging of paintings can reveal a wealth of information about the creative process of an artist. One such imaging technique is infrared reflectography, which renders many colors transparent and can penetrate the pigment layers to reveal the underdrawings on the prepared surface of a painting before the artist applied color. The Met's exhibition includes a video of imaging in infrared reflectography, which reveals the underdrawing by Raphael in his painting of the small Cooper Madonna. We can see now the Madonna of the Pinks. There we are. Okay. I want to mention the importance of infrared reflectography in the study of underdrawings, because it's one of the great important aspects that helps us verify the authorship of an artist. So in the case of the Madonna of the Pinks that you saw beforehand, the infrared reflectography shows that it is exactly like that of the small Cooper Madonna. The small Cooper Madonna has never been questioned as Raphael. However, when the Madonna of the Pinks was acquired in by the National Gallery in London, there were those who tried to say it was a copy, or that it was done by a workshop assistant of Raphael. But as you just saw, the underdrawing in the Madonna of the Pinks is exactly the same way as the small Madonna that we just looked at. So importantly, this clarifies, proves forever that this is a painting by Raphael, and you can see that in the exhibition. The thematic section on Raphael's Madonnas also displays a Madonna Esterhazy from Budapest, a very rare loan to the show. This is one of the very few paintings that Raphael left unfinished. And in this, Raphael was totally different from Leonardo. We know his fame as the artist who never completed anything, or Michelangelo, who for other reasons left a lot of paintings and sculptures incomplete. Raphael, in contrast, was efficient and practical, always drawing and painting for a purpose, never frittering away time, usually fully satisfying his clients. There are 142 drawings by Raphael woven into the selection of works in the exhibition, and most of these, as I would like to emphasize, are rarely seen together in exhibitions. At right is a famous sheet of drawings from the Palais des Beaux-Arts in Lille. In the exhibition, our visitors can see the Alba Madonna displayed with the preparatory studies on both sides of the paper, so recto and verso. In the case of the Alba Madonna, the psychological presence of the figures emanating from their gazes is extraordinary, as is also Raphael's command of landscape painting. Notice the poignant gazes of the infant John and of the Madonna. And seen here is a detail of the landscape on the left side in Raphael's Alba Madonna, and a detail of the landscape at right in Raphael's Alba Madonna. Raphael's approach to portraiture is a major theme in the Met's exhibition, with a special emphasis on the portraits of women. Here is one view of the room in the exhibition which presents Raphael's portraits. And here is the other half of the room presenting Raphael's portraits. Raphael's close study of Leonardo's famous Mona Lisa, begun in 1503, left an indelible impression in the young artist's portraiture. Sorry, we could not borrow the Mona Lisa for the exhibition. More orderly and focused as a painting than many of those by his predecessors, Raphael's so-called La Muta from Urbino offers a critical response to Leonardo in its naturalistic costume details, simplicity of composition, and chromatic harmonies. In meeting the eye of the viewer, the woman's gaze communicates her melancholic psychological state. Raphael learned from Leonardo his concept of human gesture as an embodiment of the motions of the mind and motions of the soul, what Leonardo called the moti mentali and moti dell'anima. The human mind and soul were the prime movers of the body, facial expression, and the hands, according to Leonardo and medieval Aristotelian natural philosophers. Notice the expressive force of La Muta's hands, which contrasts with the melancholy of her gaze. So Raphael delights in the details and materiality of his sitter's luxurious costumes, which is also striking, as you see in the young lady with the unicorn from the Galleria Borghese in Rome. More importantly, the psychological intensity of the young woman in Raphael's portrait in the Galleria Borghese is arresting. Very few early artists have captured the sensuality and eroticism of the female figure. For a variety of reasons, I've presented the nude Fornarina in the exhibition as an unfinished, very late painting by Raphael, which was completed largely by Giulio Romano, his major assistant. The passages by Raphael in the nude Fornarina seem quite clear to me, based on the superbly subtle execution of the anatomy, the naturalism of the fresh areas, and the beautifully diaphanous veil, especially as it goes over the contours. You see him breaking up the contours in the transparency. These passages are all done tonally with more loose brushwork. In the torso and right arm and hand of the nude Fornarina are passages of unfinished, which came to my attention as I looked at the areas of deepest shadow. There, the brown or brownish color are relatively flat as underpainting, and so I've tried to show those with arrows. In contrast, the nude Fornarina's head and awkward left hand are articulated with the pronounced contours and overly defined edges typical of Giulio Romano. Not only was Raphael among the first artists to really celebrate the sensuality of the nude female form, but he was also among the very first artists to draw studies of real-life nude women posed in the studio. The Met's exhibition offers our visitors an opportunity to admire famous masterpieces, such as a portrait of Baldassare Castiglione, the celebrated author of the Book of the Courtier, who was Raphael's intimate friend. In his paintings, Raphael sought to illuminate the very soul of his subjects beyond their external appearance, whether they were the sitters in his portraits or the actors in his dramatic narrative compositions. Here, the knowing gaze and the courtly beauty of Baldassare Castiglione's costume and pose, explored by Raphael with breathtaking technical virtuosity, served to immortalize the depth of their friendship for the ages. Raphael's later portrait of Bindo Altoviti is mesmerizing. Raphael focused on Bindo's sensuous, androgynous beauty in a way that is unique in his male portraits and is also quite rare in the history of art. I have had a crush on Bindo Altoviti, at least in the painting, in this painting. He did not age very well. There are portraits of Bindo as later in life, and they're not as attractive. The Met's exhibition gathers 142 preparatory drawings by Raphael, and these are integrated throughout the exhibition in sequences of design and in their relationship to finished paintings and prints. Raphael's drawings communicate his creativity with great immediacy and make it possible for us to follow his thinking as he experimented with ideas and painstakingly developed compositions. Raphael produced an extraordinary variety of drawing types. Some sheets will seem astonishingly expressionistic and modern. An example is a drapery study seen here at left, and at right is the other side of this sheet, which offers a draft of a Petrarchan sonnet and a figural composition. The Met's exhibition reunites numerous studies for Raphael's frescoes in the Vatican Palace, and among these, over 40 drawings for the Stanza della Segnatura. Here, we can witness Raphael's extremely disciplined approach to the design process, as well as his enormous willingness to experiment. But scholars often study Raphael's drawings from photographs, often treating them as images in books or as comparisons for paintings. And to emphasize, photographs of drawings entirely flatten the topography of both the drawn mark and the paper. In photos, we stop seeing the evidence of the creative process on the paper in a continuum of time. And so we may ask, where and how does the artist start on the paper? I think we can see that in originals. How does he search for the poses of a figure? What does he struggle with? What does he correct? What does he omit? By bringing together a very large group of drawings by Raphael, we hope to support scholars and students in their close study of his drawings from originals. To stress, even seasoned scholars do not always have easy access to Raphael's drawings in museums. We'll leave those museums nameless here. This very small pen and ink sketch for the vault frescoes of the Stanza della Segnatura teems with an electrifying energy. Raphael, who was a very practical draftsman, adapted his style and technique when having to draw large drawings for frescoes with forms that needed to be seen from a far viewing distance. An example is his very rare cartoon fragment for the fresco of the Disputa, which has enormous expressive force. The hatching here is bold and gestural with very little blending of strokes. This monumental head of a horse is a large cartoon fragment for the expulsion of Heliodoros. The panting animal here seems alive in a way that the corresponding detail in the final fresco is not. Since the Met's exhibition presents numerous of Raphael's drawings for his Vatican frescoes, the Met's exhibition includes a large room embedded in the galleries with a digital, nearly life-size scale presentation of Raphael's frescoes on the 4 walls in each of the 4 rooms in the Vatican Palace. The video loop was produced by the Met's brilliant digital department. And from this video loop showing the 4 Raphael rooms in the Vatican Palace, the visitor can experience the monumental scale of the frescoes. 2 alcoves in the Met's exhibition explore the grand Roman manner of the altarpieces, paintings, and drawings of Raphael's later years. Compared to his early works, the figures now seem larger than life, and the dramatic compositions teem with physical and psychological energy. The exhibition also displays this fresco fragment by Raphael from the Accademia Nazionale di San Luca in Rome. I've proposed that this fresco fragment was a decorative element above a fireplace in a destroyed room in the Vatican Palace. Above this fireplace, this fresco of a puto flanked the coat of arms of Pope Julius II and had a companion puto on the other side of Julius's coat of arms. Raphael painted the monumental altarpiece of the Madonna of the Fish, or Madonna del Pesce, from the Museo Nacional del Prado for the Church of San Domenico Maggiore in Naples. Raphael's genius for dramatic composition is striking. Here, a group of holy figures interact in animated conversation against the theatrical backdrop of a parting green curtain. The Madonna of the Fish, or Madonna del Pesce, from the Prado is of extraordinary beauty and has not received enough positive attention in the literature. So in the exhibition, I've also tried to bring paintings and drawings that have been, in my opinion, too undervalued in terms of their beautiful execution. Among the most gorgeous of Raphael's late paintings is a Madonna of the Rose from the Prado, done 2 years before his death. Raphael was devoted to the practice of life drawing until the very end of his life. The animated pose of the Christ child in the painting reveals his attentive study of real-life infants, as you see in the drawing at left. Another alcove in the Met's exhibition centers on the monumental altarpiece of the Ecstasy of Saint Cecilia, commissioned by Elena Duglioli dall'Olio, one of Raphael's rare female patrons from Bologna. Raphael's paintings were the envy of collectors across the European continent, so much so that a number of his monumental paintings, such as the Madonna of the Fish and the Ecstasy of Saint Cecilia altarpieces, were confiscated by Napoleon's agents and were taken to Paris in the late 1790s to form Napoleon's new museum. The looted paintings were only later restituted to Italy and Spain around 1815. Here is a detail of the broken musical instruments on the ground in the lower portion of the monumental altarpiece of the Ecstasy of Saint Cecilia from the Pinacoteca Nazionale in Bologna. I can't believe that this altarpiece is in the Met's exhibition and that we can display it. The Met's exhibition reunites 3 monumental tapestries from a set woven in Brussels based on Raphael's full-scale cartoons painted in color. The tapestries illustrate Raphael's powers as a storyteller in a grand scale. The enormous tapestries arrived rolled up to the Met's exhibition. Too big to fit in a freight elevator, they were carried up the Met's 2 main stairs by several strong Met colleagues. The 3 tapestries from the Patrimonio Nacional de España in Madrid represent a second edition woven from Raphael's designs of the Acts of the Apostles, first ordered by Pope Leo X. They are documented, these tapestries are documented in the collection of King Philip II of Spain, and these tapestries have not been previously exhibited outside Spain. Here you see the largest tapestry, St. Paul and St. Barnabas at Lystra. The colors in the Madrid tapestries are very well preserved, which is very rare. And here is a third of these majestic tapestries from Madrid portraying the miraculous draught of the fish. The unique tapestry from the first edition of the Acts of the Apostles, woven for Pope Leo X, is also in the exhibition, lent by the Vatican Museums. This long, imposing tapestry, woven from Raphael's design, illustrates his formidable imagination as a narrative painter. The tapestry depicts the scene of St. Paul being miraculously liberated from prison by an earthquake. So in the lower register of the tapestry, a giant, who is the allegorical personification of the earthquake, bursts through the ground and the borders of the scene. Raphael's conceptual genius as a landscape painter is neglected in the literature, despite the strong visual evidence of the masterful painting technique and style of the Vision of Ezekiel. It has seemed surprising to me that some recent art historians still insist in attributing this small, exquisitely painted panel to Giulio Romano, Raphael's pupil and assistant, rather than accept Raphael's authorship. The Vision of Ezekiel is a late painting by Raphael from around 1517, 1518, executed soon after Leonardo had written his theories on landscape and the meteorological events that transform landscapes. Raphael's painting depicts a vast landscape transformed by a miraculous weather event, revealing an empirical study of nature. Raphael rendered the landscape in atmospheric perspective along a diagonal depth of space from foreground to distant background, a splendid alchemy of divine light, natural sunlight, and a storm in progress with wind and rain transforms this vast landscape as it courses from left to right in the composition. Having remarked on the influence of Leonardo in Raphael's late career, let us now return briefly to Raphael and Michelangelo. As we have seen, Raphael first studied Michelangelo's Battle of Cascina cartoon and Michelangelo's marble sculptures on his arrival in Florence in 1504. So from 1504 onward and until his death in 1520, Raphael would engage in a continuous but highly competitive artistic conversation with Michelangelo's art. The secretive Michelangelo expressed his toxic hatred of Raphael throughout that time, and in fact, even into the 1540s, 2 decades after Raphael's death, he was writing to a friend two decades later about how Raphael impeded his career. And Raphael learned anything good in Raphael's art, he got it from me, as Michelangelo said. Raphael's drawing from Chatsworth from about 1511, 1514 was intended for the unexecuted resurrection for Agostino Chigi in the Church of Santa Maria della Pace. It is one of Raphael's most dramatic and virtuosic responses to Michelangelo. Here, 3 male nudes in twisting poses are projected in different perspective into 3 different planes within the depth of the pictorial space, a quasi-illusionistic feat. In contrast, Michelangelo's figures tend often to be self-contained, as if in a marble block, or they seem to sometimes stretch along a single plane, as if in a marble relief. In his drawings for the unexecuted Resurrection for Agostino Chigi, Raphael offered a further critical response to Michelangelo's powerful anatomical studies. Raphael portrays the sensuous, velvety surface of skin over muscles in this drawing, in contrast to Michelangelo's drawings, in which the musculature often glistens like polished marble. Raphael's studies for the apostles in the lower register of the altarpiece of the Transfiguration date to shortly before he died in 1520 and mark the culmination in his artistic career. As is well known, Raphael's altarpiece of the Transfiguration was intended to compete with the raising of Lazarus, painted by Sebastiano del Piombo, begun in 1517, and for which Michelangelo supplied many drawings. Raphael's late studies for the Transfiguration are unique in that they render the models posing for him with a sensitive, portrait-like humanity. But as finally painted in the Transfiguration, however, their features and their personhood were thoroughly transformed, abstracted, and idealized as Raphael turned them into apostles. While Raphael's fame as a painter was public, constant, and undisputed for several centuries, the genius of his drawings was quietly appreciated only by knowledgeable collectors during the course of those centuries, although the drawings were the backbone of Raphael's creativity. Owned by the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, the study for 2 apostles in the Transfiguration was among the most highly prized drawings in the 18th and 19th centuries. It is a drawing of sublime beauty, which helps us better understand why Raphael continued to be idolized as a supreme Italian Renaissance artist from about 1510, so within Raphael's life, to the late 19th century. But the history of changing tastes has also greatly affected Raphael's fame during the course of 3 centuries. Changing tastes eventually led to the greater fame of Leonardo and Michelangelo, and to a lesser appreciation of Raphael in the 20th and 21st centuries. One of the reasons may well be that as a modern and contemporary public, we are today perhaps overly comfortable with the expressive power of abstract art. Raphael's paintings may have often seemed too perfect in their technical virtuosity, too easily graceful and harmonious in their compositions and use of color. But Raphael's drawings embody a different truth as they manifest the full, arduous journey of his creativity with a tremendous expressive force. His drawings bear witness to the range of his thinking on paper as he studiously and patiently experimented. The corpus of Raphael's drawings allows us then to conclude that the almost preternatural perfection and harmonies seen in his paintings were the result of a very hard-won victory. So the museum is open today until 9 p.m. Enjoy and certainly go to the Raphael exhibition. Thank you.